Hello, my name is Shoki Levi and I am an architect and architecture lecturer in university. The reason I am here is because I want to share with you a feeling that I believe accompanies not only me but also my friends in the learning environment. We do not teach architecture, we are close to the architecture students. And the feeling as I understand it about what happened in the last 3 decades, and it's not funny, something from this story in the way we meet knowledge, the vast amount of knowledge and the way we are constantly flooded with a huge level of things. We can access things in 1 second. Next to this fact, I want to ask us if it doesn't a little stifle, suppress and put down our creative thought. These two guys, Ken Robinson, this famous professor of arts education, who passed away a year ago, and who has the most views on the internet on YouTube. He is corresponding with Professor Tim Lunig, economic history teacher and in the Department of Education, and it responds to him in TED Lectures. Both discuss the relationship and the mutual effects between the amount of knowledge and knowledge in general, and where we are or our creative thought, and the drive that takes us to discoveries of innovation. Ken Robinson argues convincingly that we first need to meet this human being, which has the creative drive, to see how this potential is taken and cultivated, and only then can it reach knowledge. Since the adolescent is curious by nature, he will have the thirst to know, he will have the curiosity and inquisitiveness, and according to him, what do we actually encounter in a day-old baby? So we name it here as this is knowledge based on inquisitiveness. Tim Lunig does not really oppose him, even though he agrees with him, he claims otherwise. The ability to start thinking creatively will come based on knowledge and broad education, and only after you are knowledge-based. And this approach is called technologically based knowledge in the lecture. I approached to research and examine this issue within the field of architecture. I sought to stand on the relationship between the factors knowledge and creative thinking, and the precedence and prioritization of each of the factors and according to the different approaches. I conducted an experimental exercise and analyzed it. It took place within the framework of the School of Architecture at Ariel University, in Israel, and within the framework of a basic design course for first-year architecture students. I presented the students with a short exercise. I divided the group into 2 small groups of 8 students. In front of them I placed brushes and black and white gouache paints and large white sheets. I read them a short biblical story from Genesis, telling the story of the construction of the Tower of Babel. And I asked them to draw the Tower of Babel on the sheet. In the first step, they were asked not to coordinate or talk to each other about how to perform the work. Everyone was required to participate, and to the best of their understanding and interpretation. Some of them didn't even know the story. I asked them to use creative thinking from their personal imagination. For me, the first drawing sits under the exercise category, curiosity-based knowledge. The second part of the exercise, which also lasted about 4 minutes, allowed them to talk and coordinate with each other about the piece and plan the painting. They were given the opportunity to exchange knowledge, surf the net, read and look online at Wikipedia, Pinterest, or any source of knowledge they wanted. The second drawing apparently sits under the technologically based knowledge exercise category. I want to show you the paintings. And what we see above in the slide, these are 2 drawings of the Tower of Babel, of each of the groups that had no connection between them. And the work is based on creativity based on personal imagination. Below you can see the 2 drawings that were drawn after acquiring the knowledge and exposure to the sources, which I included in the category of creative thought based on technologically based knowledge. In my humble opinion, and I leave it up to you, the spectators in the crowd, my question is, where can you identify more creative freedom, up or down? And if we probably agree? For me, this turns on a kind of red light. The students also felt the difference between their works created under different preconditions for each work. They realized that, in the first stage of the exercise, they did not know or see the Tower of Babel, not even through the mediation of later representations of it. This is where my research question arises: what is the strength of the impact of exposure to knowledge overload on creative thinking? I will try to take you to research. In light of the conference held at our university in 2020 under the title Tower of Babel Infrastructure as a Paradox, and for which I conducted the experiment with the students, I asked to look through the glasses that contrast knowledge and creative thinking. In my opinion, the story of the Tower of Babel is a good starting point to discuss the issue. And for the reason that it is possible to research and insist on the connection between existing knowledge that does not depend on time and the creative thinking that is correct for that time. Already there and already then, we recognize in the text a possible interpretation relevant to the discussion. None of us have been to the area attributed to the Tower of Babel, which is in today's Iraq and Iran. Please look at the pictures on the upper right. The place is a sandy desert. And the quarrying of the stones is difficult, as we know, in Egypt for the pyramids. And here I emphasize in the text people say to each other, "Let's make clay bricks, and burn them into building blocks." I mean, look on the left side, there is a small group of people there, who recognize a need for building materials, and in a limited time, their friends want to get to God quickly. This group is technologically curious, understands that it is necessary to prepare molds and variable sizes and to manufacture ovens for burning. A clear process of the industrial pan required for operation. Beyond that, this whole story, of lifting a building and even in today's terms, developed technology, the ability to control and organize, and the ability to manage work teams. It is not simple and even complex on a large scale from a technical and human point of view. The questions that arise from this: what knowledge did they have at their disposal, even then? How was it transferred between them? What manifestations of innovation and creative thinking are marked in the mentioned period? We move many years forward in time, maybe thousands of years. We see in front of us the famous painter Bruegel the Elder and ask the next question before he puts a brush on the canvas: what knowledge did he have, and how his creative mind interprets the biblical text? Bruegel becomes an apprentice to Van Alst, who was a painter, sculptor, architect, woodworker, jeweler, and carpet weaver, and Bruegel works under him for 15 years. For him, he is not yet mature to paint the Tower of Babel. And if he asks himself, which tower do I know? So, the knowledge available to him at the time and place he lived in, look down, was a building that was only about 9 meters high. He travels to Rome, and for 10 years he paints landscapes and urban sketches, and only after that, he is free to make his famous painting. In other words, he collects, accumulates, and acquires vast knowledge, similar to Tim Luning's approach, and then he is able to release the creative thought. What can be understood from this, and with an emphasis on creative thinking? If so, let's concentrate on discoveries of innovation and creative thinking and based on existing knowledge. As most of you know, what is called the psychotechnical test, the most popular test for evaluating creative thinking, it is the Torrance tests of creative thinking (TTCT). The measurement values in the test are these: imitation, copying and imitation of an existing thing, a manipulative action on the original, until it is converted into an independent object. Absorption from a variety of sources, reading literature, media, personal interviews. Guilford added about Torrance in his theory of branching thinking: fluency of thought, many ideas. Mental flexibility, a variety of ideas. And the following relationships expressed in the product and representation: improvement, development, compilation, filling in ideas, using ideas, and personal interpretation of concepts also taken from other fields. Originality, use of ideas, which are not self-evident or banal, or statistically correct. An integrative connection, unexpected in materials and methods. Aspiration for innovation in idea, concept, story, or narrative that takes on a new meaning. Creative function in reference to layers of information and layers from another angle. And in conclusion, according to their recommendation, it is important to understand that a good mission approach is original and smart, and does not categorically stand between right and wrong. Renzulli and Hartman, they added a new pan from a research point of view and raised another condition for realizing the potential of creativity skills. Even if we all have an innate creative drive, whether when the feature is realized and can be expressed is affected by another thing. What is it? They call it a gifted gift. It's pretty clear to them. Creative thinking relies on inventory of personal traits, biographical characteristics, habitats, and learning environments, and acquired cultural capital. Deviation from the conformist and unconventional that require multiple uses for a familiar and accepted object, and this depends on the gifted gift. We have reached the year 2023. I want to address the facts. Multiply the facts by the square of the speed of exposure. How do we examine, if at all, the knowledge that overwhelms us? What then is his credibility? What is the information in it? What is the medium used to transmit it? Perhaps, diluting essence, pausing time, and deepening ability. Perhaps, a level of exposure that prefers the quantity of representations over dwelling on them in depth and insisting on their quality. That is, the exposure to visual knowledge outweighs the exposure to textual knowledge. FOMO equals fear of missing out. This act of locating and discovering leads to oversearching, to the feeling of missing the coverage of the multiple material. Stimulation of creative thinking and knowing the unknown independently are lost. And what about us, standing on infrastructure that may prevent us from building towers in the air? In an encounter with a vast pool of knowledge, the subjective internalization may increase, that everything has already been done in the world and on a large scale, and in light of this lead to the death of the Creator. The experience that has changed. Body movement is reduced, the body is less involved in learning. Discussion. There is no debate that a lot of knowledge is a good thing for the world and to discover in it. But its presence and influence have significant consequences. And maybe it undermines our creative thinking. What should we do? Make every effort to educate for intellectual independence. Allow high exposure to knowledge but with restraint. Cultivate self-control against the flood of official expressions. Tendency to essence. Sojourn, deep observation and insight. Take care of the transition to strengthening the creativity drive. To question things. Encourage an experience that breaks boundaries, enrich manipulative mechanisms. Travel on a journey to the edge of the possible. Observe the inner experience. With the face for independent and innovative technological development. A space for personal expression about the attitude to the world. Saying, taking a stand, shaping thinking. Thank you all.